Hello, everyone. We're here with Clay Harshall, Associate Professor of Motorsports at Winston-Salem State University. And I'm Juana Ramirez, a fellow graduate of the program. And to start us off, why don't you tell us how you first got interested in motorsports?
So, kind of the way that a lot of people do get into motorsport is through family. My mom and dad both did grassroots motorsport. So they did Sports Car Club of South Carolina, and put it in perspective, it's 1960s. Uh, Doing sports car weekend get together at a vacant parking lot or something and do autocross or doing road rallies. Um, and mom was very good as a driver and beat a lot of the men who were racing, uh, which, of course, late 60s, that made her a lot of friends. Um, and my dad also won a lot with that. And then I remember we were at a road rally, and my dad got very angry with the politics of the sports car club and gets back to the car and said, "We're done with this." And I don't know, maybe a year later, my brother and I got home from school and there were motorcycles in the garage. And my dad started racing those. We all rode, but it's one of those things that I always say motorsport's kind of in my blood. I love speed and I've always loved the business side of it, the sponsorship, the things that you do to become a driver, all of it. Uh, that's how I got into it. And kind of strangely, it's kind of like the way got into being a professor was my grandparents were professors. My mom was a teacher. My brother's a professor. And I just kind of, you know, got very, very lucky that I'm able to put both of these things together.
Yeah. Okay, you could say that the passion followed you all through your
Oh,
life.
yeah. Um, yeah, my cousin sent me a picture the other day of my brother and me in the garage with motorcycles. Kind of zoomed in on it the other day, and it's like 1972. So
Not too
a
long ago.
very long time.
Now, speaking on the movie, in your opinion, which is the least realistic aspect of it and what's the most realistic?
One of the things that's really unrealistic um, is the amount of crashing into each other. That happens on the short tracks, like Martinsville or Bristol. But at a place like Daytona, they're not going to do it. And even the ending of the movie is where the cars are so beat up that there's no way they would be able to race at Daytona like that today or 30 some years ago, whenever the movie came out. I think that's probably the biggest one. Um, some of the other aspects, it's kind of hard to tell in the movie. Is Harry building this car in a barn, or is it a very well ventilated garage with holes in the walls? That would be unrealistic.
What's the most realistic?
A lot of it's the sponsorship. That whole thing of I lost my ride. Uh, Actually, the Cole Trickle thing of losing the ride because the fraud by the sponsor was turned out to be his dad. But that is a real possibility. I've seen stories of drivers losing their sponsorship because of a change in CEO. It happened with Joe Gibbs Racing had sponsorship with Dollar General at one point. The new CEO came in and said, "We're done with this. We're not doing it anymore." And that aspect's very much a realistic possibility. Uh, the Some of the stuff that's changed, is based on money too. Is how much money can go into a car? How much money can we put into travel.
Yeah. Now, this film was made in 1990 when NASCAR was first mainstream. How has the motorsport business changed since it was made?
Probably one of the biggest changes has been in the safety. You look at, well, if you could see some of the cars and the inside of the car where it's sitting in it in the movie, drivers don't sit in the car anymore. They kind of wear the car. The seats are designed solely for that driver. They're custom built for them. Um, the headrest now goes all the way around the head, so there's a limited amount of head movement. Um, for any Cup series, like what they were showing, um, except on the road courses, they have to have safer barrier around the walls to reduce the amount of impact. And it's one of those things that, being involved or watching racing for as long as I have, the number of injuries that have occurred has been reduced significantly. Um, in terms of the business model, uh, everything's changed. It's the cars are no longer fabricated in the same way. They're being built instead of built each team building a chassis. Uh, they're getting a single supplier of the chassis. Uh, body panels are composite instead of money or metal. So that has been a significant change. About the only thing that is different for each team is going to be the engine.
Speaking on the safety barriers, that's one of the things that they changed. They had to update in Bowman Gray, and we
Right.
saw that over the winter. I remember going to class and just seeing all the changes that they were doing.
Yeah, it was when they brought the Clash to Bowman Gray, they had to upgrade that entire facility. And one of the big improvements was putting in the safer barrier, which has stayed for Saturday night races throughout the summer. Uh, changed the way the fencing was put in, which has been really nice. This year, I know a lot of the fans didn't like it that they left the fencing up along the straightaways because last year they took it away, but this year they just decided to keep the fencing up, which I like. Remember from classes and like risk management type things where I would say, if you think it can happen, chances are it can. And I've seen the cars get up on top of the wall or over the wall at Bowman Gray, not up into the stands, but over the guardrails. And so I'm glad they put the fences up.
As a social scientist, what do you think are the top two or three trends that are in motorsports impacting the industry right now?
I think one of the biggest trends is the data that's being used. The other part is, I was actually talking to somebody about this today, is they no longer do practice uh, at tracks. It, back, 20, 30 years ago, NASCAR allowed teams to practice at Martinsville, at Charlotte. And then, like at the beginning of where they rent the track for the day, teams could rent the track and get in practice laps. They switched that and said, okay, you can't practice on tracks that we race at. So the teams would go to different tracks. So instead of Martinsville, they would go to Greenville Pickens Speedway, which is almost the exact replica. Um, and then they said, no more practices. And so that shifted from practice to in the actual car to going to a simulator. So big money teams had simulators. And now instead of teams having simulators, the manufacturers have it. That's one trend, is moving to the simulator. And in another way, it used to be that drivers would build hometown backing by racing at tracks like Bowman Gray or South Boston, uh, various small tracks, and build up fan base. That fan base is really not there partly because drivers are coming in at an earlier age, and where they're building their skill is on simulator. Raja Karuth graduated from the program. That was how he got started. He didn't actually get behind the wheel until he was maybe 15 or 16. And for a lot of drivers, they actually start like in go-karts at age 5 and 6. Well, the simulator has changed that model significantly. So I think that, and that I kind of wonder, where's our home track? It's going to be iRacing or Twitch, which is that streaming service for gaming.
Do you think that the push towards sim racing will provide more opportunities for young racers to get a potential, like Raja did, a seat?
Uh, I think so. It's good. It opens the door to a lot of other people uh, who, I joke that the only way I can afford to go racing at my age now is to do it as a simulator. I can, you know, and a nice simulator rig is 30,000, which is less than it is to get into a race car. And the my biggest, I guess, the joke for me is that when I crash that car, I don't have to rebuild it, and I don't have to check out of the hospital.
Just
I just
restart the
hit
game.
I just hit a reset button and keep going.
Yeah.
And that can help people who don't have a lot of money to get into racing, and it can get them seeing. Uh, there is some translation of a simulator to a real car as opposed to a game and a real sport. So I can't see somebody being a great, I don't know, NBA 2K or whatever, Madden football. That doesn't translate to actual gameplay.
Now, if we wanted to learn more about motorsports here locally, where could we go to look?
So learning about motorsport in the Winston-Salem area, um, there, obviously, you know, come to Winston-Salem State and learn the business of racing. Forsyth Tech and Community College has the race car technology program where if somebody's wanting to get into building cars, that would be where to go. Learning about the history, there's a place over on, I think it's on Liberty Street. It's called the Nash. Uh, they have a small museum. The other is Richard Childress Racing Museum in Welcome, has a tremendous amount of history available.
Can you tell us a little bit about the motorsports program at Winston-Salem State?
Sure. The motorsport program at Winston State is solely about business. It's the sponsorship, public relations, media relations, race shop management, operational logistics, all the things that go on behind the scenes. Uh, Sometimes we refer to it as everything that goes on the business side. That's 90% of the business. So we can put on a show on Sunday. Uh, it's I would say there's four parts of it. It's the team, tracks, uh, suppliers, and sanctioning bodies. That's really what we're getting into, and helping students develop those skills that they need to be successful in the motorsport industry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for having me.
Can I ask a follow-up question real quick? You mentioned one of the changes or trends is the use of data. Could you go a little bit more into depth on how they're using data?
Oh, well, part of the data that I'm seeing is uh, like getting into specificity of setting up cars. They are now able, like going through the simulator, pulling data from making changes to the car in the simulator, a quarter pound of air pressure in a tire and seeing how that affects it. Uh, they're using lasers now instead of tape measures and levels. And I talked to one guy years ago, and he was saying that they're trying to find a way to make the drivetrain not lose horsepower for them. So it's like get the drive shaft to the differential and making sure that it is within 10 1,000ths of an inch to so they don't lose horsepower. Uh, and I guess one thing in the safety area, one of the data points that they're doing is they're measuring head movement. There's a project that NASCAR works with. It's the Wake Forest Virginia Tech lab that's in Winston-Salem, and they're measuring head movement of the drivers. Uh, if you're watching a race, and sometimes you'll see at the end of the race, a driver pulls out a mouthpiece. That mouthpiece is measuring their head movement. And they're doing that with a lot of different sports. I saw some data from uh, soccer and the trauma that the head receives from heading the ball is pretty significant.
Well, this movie obviously deals with the issue
Right.
of concussions
Yeah.
in sports. And what I recall is, growing up in Charlotte, it was about 5 years after this movie that Dale Earnhardt had his fatal wreck.
Right.
And so am I right that most of the safety innovation actually followed that incident, that death on the track?
A lot of it did. Uh, and so part of what came from that crash was placement of the seat because Dale Earnhardt liked to almost lay down in the car. There's a thing where somebody said he almost like you could look at the side of the car and it almost looked like he wasn't in it. With this, how low is he drive in it? So they moved the seat forward, then required neck restraint, like it's called Hans device, a head and neck system, to prevent the head movement. It's also where the eventually got the wraparound seats for the around the head.
That's what you're referring to with
Yes.
you're wearing the collar.
Yeah, and even before that, Randy LaJoie, who was a driver in the series, started developing seats because so many of the seats were designed solely to cover the ribs. And kind of the way he put it was, I'd never see a football player run up to complete a tackle by lifting his arms up and hitting them with his ribs. So he started building seats so that it would cover the shoulder. And that helped reduce movement as well. But the reduction of head movement is, and like in a crash, the whole idea of safer barrier, Hans device, the seats work together to prevent the head from moving too far forward on the neck. And it's sort of, and we can't put airbags in a race car, but what they were doing is reducing the uh, distance between the head and the steering wheel. Uh, Hitting the steering wheel while wearing a helmet reduces the neck injury and the chance of spinal injuries.
I will also add that after Jules Bianchi's incident, they added the Halo 2 open wheel, which would be Formula One and IndyCar. And that has been very helpful in preventing deadly crashes in multiple races. You saw it with Lewis Hamilton, you saw it with Charles Leclerc, where specifically with Lewis, the car ended up on top of him. So were it not for the halo, it wouldn't have, like, it would have probably crushed him. And with Ganyuzu as well, whenever he flipped over, it was able to keep him safe and not hit the track because he fully flipped around, slid, and then ended up on the safety barrier.
Well, and even Grosjean's crash,
Yes.
where he went through, it was at the beginning of the race, full load of fuel, went through the guardrail, and car explodes, and somehow the man walks out of it. And without the halo, he wouldn't have done that.
So basically, science and innovation has
Yes.
really made this sport
Oh, yeah.
safe.
Innovation on making the car go faster and keeping the driver safe.
And it's there's there's no safe race car. Let's face facts. There's no safe race car. You know, it's an unsafe thing, but there is something about us wanting to go fast. And so I did a ride along at Phoenix and got up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 130, 140 miles an hour. Well, I loved it. I, I got home and somebody asked me, did it scare you? And it's like, well, no. Uh, I wanted to go faster. And it's that thing. I had a student one time, we were at a trade show and they have displays of different types of race vehicles. And I had a student that would ask me, would pass something and he'd say, would you race that, Dr. Harshaw? And it's like, yeah. It's like, that doesn't scare you. It's like, no. It's like one of those things of none of it really scared me. But then we walked by this thing, it's called a Top Fuel Harley Davidson dragster. So it's a dragging racing motorcycle. And I stopped him and I said, Sydney, this is the only thing that scares me. And he says, so you wouldn't do it? And it's like, oh, no, no, no. It's the only one that scares me. I'd still do it. And actually, I know some people that race drag racing motorcycles. It's called Pro Stock. They get up to around 200 miles an hour. Top Fuel Harley will get up to around 230, 240. And their old motto is making fat guys go fast. And I said, I qualify. So I would still do it, but it would scare me.
Well, thank you so much for this illuminating discussion of science and sport. Does anyone else have a question back there? Okay.
What would you say was the big science emphasis in the 90s in racing, and what's the big science emphasis now in racing?
Wow. 30 years ago.
Mhm.
In the 90s, I think one of the big things at that time was wind tunnel testing. Um, that, you'll always have engine development, but wind tunnel really got big in the 90s. In every sport that involved any kind of drafting type situation. For instance, I know that they do wind tunnel testing for bicycles. But I think in the 90s that was it. And what was it in today? On the science side, I would
Sim
it,
racing.
it's still, still have a lot of aerodynamics. Um, I think it's a little lesser degree to it. Um, really don't know how much has changed. Taking care of the driver has been a big push in the past 5 to 10 years. Um, you know, I think about it, it's like I can remember watching racing and almost expecting fatalities throughout the season. And now it's a really rare occurrence. And that's where I think that by building the safety measures that we are, granted, we're less tolerant of fatalities and injury than we were 50 years ago. Um, but that's been, a process of developing it. And a lot of that came from drivers. I know in F1, um, a push for safety came in the 70s with Jackie Stewart, uh, who was world champion, and he really pushed to make F1 safer because he was losing friends.
Well, it's worth noting in NASCAR, Dale Earnhardt was the last fatality on the track, right?
I,
2001.
I think so.
Yeah. So his legacy has been felt, I guess. Yes. Another question?
I'll ask a question.
Mhm.
So I think in the movie, I really liked how they showed the different tracks. So what is your favorite track you've been to?
Uh,
I know you've been to a lot.
so, favorite NASCAR track would be Phoenix. Uh, and maybe it's because of the time of year I was there. I was in there in November. Um, and it's just a beautiful area. Sunsets were gorgeous. The only problem with it is that we were working it. So it's kind of like I saw a hotel room and I saw a track and I saw a hotel room. We didn't get to see Arizona very much. Uh, I would say my other favorite track would be Barber Motorsport Park. It's an IndyCar track, motorcycle track in Alabama. And it's, again, time of year. I've been there in April and October, actually. But it's just a beautiful place. Um, and I guess, well, Ryan, um, I can officially say that I have raced at Daytona and Indianapolis. I did a 5K at Daytona on the road course, and my wife and I just did the Indy Mini half marathon that does a lap around uh, the speedway, uh, which it's one of those things you have no idea how big these places are until you actually go to them. So those would be mine. And
Martinsville in the spring with all the pollen.
Martinsville is always fun, especially when it snows. Um, I was there when it snowed for the truck race. Um, and I really enjoy Virginia International Raceway uh, near Danville. Uh, it's just, it's just a beautiful place that just happens to have a track in the middle of it.
Any more questions?
All right. Well, thank you again. This has been really, really educational.
Well, thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.